It was April 16th, 2026. I'd been stuck in a rut. A gaming rut. The type of rut that makes you want to take a deep puff of blue cheese just to feel something again. All these games, but not a thing worth playing. Nothing with a rind worth sinking my teeth into. At least, that's what I thought. But then I got something. Something extra sharp. Something that caught me like a mouse in a trap the moment I laid eyes on it. As I looked at the spread in front of me, I thought, maybe this wasn't just another unpasteurized piece of work. This could be something Gouda. Mouse PI is a game I've been looking forward to for a long time. Any game that makes use of this rubber hose animation style like Cuphead does immediately gets my attention because it's usually a sign that the game is crafted with love and care. Plus, the premise of a crime noir mouse detective boomer shooter is absolutely incredible, and I think that would get anyone's attention. You play as Jack Pepper, and once you find this out, you'll spend the entire rest of the game trying to figure out what super niche cheeses all the other characters are named after. The game starts you off in a cold open chase sequence, giving you the tutorial while you hunt down your latest dirty rat. The game loads you with questions immediately, and by the time you make it out of the tutorial, you've received barely any answers. From there, we learn about Jack's social circle, including his sorta daughter/weapon crafter Tammy, Wanda the journalist, mayoral candidate and war buddy Cornelius, and bar owner John. From here, the story delivers multiple different cases for you to pursue that weave into and out of relevance with each other, all while suggesting deeper ties underneath. What happened to your old war buddy Steve? Who killed the actress Betty? What is happening to the shrews, a smaller subspecies of mouse person, to make them all disappear?
No sign of the shrews. Either they vanished into thin air, or I've been chasing my own tail again.
Story aside, you cannot talk about this game without gushing over the incredible artwork, animation, and visuals. I said earlier that rubber hose animation in a game is usually a good sign, and this game is no exception. From entire skyline views of buildings and scenery, to the smallest animation of a frog in the corner, every inch of this game's visual just oozes passion. Especially the little things that they definitely could have ignored, like a spider getting ready to eat a bug in the corner of a vent, or unique animations for every level of upgrade you put into each of your weapons, goes that much further into letting you know that developers care a lot about the appearance of their game. In the same vein as lovingly crafted animation, they've also put clear effort into making the city of Mouseburg feel alive. Tons of people walking around, plenty of detail in the clutter and the hustle of the city, and plenty of little posters, books, and other little jokes to give you a quick nose exhale and reward you for exploring every nook and cranny of each of the levels. Every minute you spend playing the game, you'll spend appreciating both the big and little things they've done to make it really fit in with its art style. I genuinely cannot praise it enough. I also want to compliment the soundtrack for the game. The main motif is super catchy, and I think they've really done something unique across the entire soundtrack in the way they've combined the sort of rubber holes, old-timey Steamboat Willie type music with this sort of dark, brooding style of the crime noir inspired pieces.
Trouble is what I do.
Another clear display of the handcrafted feel that this game has going for it is in its weapons and gunplay. This is a boomer shooter, and that means you are going to have a big arsenal of weapons, and every single one of them looks incredible. They bounce around like rubber while you move and shoot, they have custom ammo icons with little faces on them, and even have unique death animations for every different enemy in the game. By the time I finished the entire game, I was still finding different weapon and enemy combinations that I hadn't seen before, which was awesome. Speaking of weapons, even shooters as charming as Mouse PI will live or die by their combat loop. When I think boomer shooter, I think dashing around the battlefield non-stop, constantly swapping between weapons to take out as many enemies as I can, and making rapid, split-second decisions for every enemy. What weapon would work best here? Can I shoot anything in the environment? Are there any pickups nearby? Where are all the different spawn locations in this exact moment? And these are all questions that I did find myself thinking about while I played. I chose the hard difficulty, and I definitely felt the pressure multiple times in the game, especially in the latter half, pushing me to move quick and kill quicker. It gets to the point where you have such a large arsenal of weapons that you really are spoiled for choice in how you want to deal with enemies. Movement feels fluid, and there are plenty of unlockable movement upgrades you get throughout the game that really have you schmoving, as well as power upgrades that make you feel unstoppable for a few minutes while you burn, punch, or finger gun your enemies to death. However, I don't think that the combat is perfect. I do actually have a few gripes with it. Despite how good moving and shooting feels in the game, my number one complaint is the lack of air dashing. How is there no air dashing? You can double jump and you can dash in the game, but you can't air dash. It constantly felt wrong on like an instinctual level to try and jump and dash at the same time to get to different cliffs or edges, or just to dodge enemy fire, and I actually had to train myself out of feeling like I needed to do it because it felt so much like I should be able to do it. Additionally, all of the weapons in this game are not created equal. Ideally, you would have a different weapon for every scenario based on the range, the health your enemy has, how many enemies there are, stuff like that. But the weapons you get earlier in the game are the ones that I find myself using basically for the entire run, even after fully upgrading every single weapon in the game. It's a little disappointing to me that most of the prestigious weapons in the game that you don't get without progressing really far or spending a lot of tokens feel so weak compared to the basic shotgun or Tommy gun. James gun. One weapon in particular, I spent over an hour playing the in-game baseball card game just to unlock, and I fired that thing maybe twice before I put it away and never touched it again. It just wasn't strong enough to compete with the basic weapons. Forget about outperforming them. Overall, I am a fan of the combat in this game. It is really fun, but I do think there are a few tweaks to be made to movement and some of the weapons to make it pop just that much more. Please add air dashing for me games, please. Weapons aside, the variety of enemies you face throughout the game is constantly increasing, which is what you would expect from a game like this, and I'm pleased to say they mostly hit the mark on that. Now, I do want to point out that there are a lot of reskinned enemies in this game, and whether you're fighting crooked cops, or mobsters, or cultists, or any of the other enemies that show up in the game, you are certainly going to come up against a melee guy, a machine gun guy, and a quick little guy. But, while that stays consistent, I found that essentially every other level added a new type of enemy to the roster, which held true all the way up until the game was done. Combined with a very diverse set of levels, plenty of verticality, and more than a few fun gimmicks on each level, encounter design never felt like a drag to me. I was having fun all the way until the end. Except for when they made me shoot dogs. I do not like shooting dogs. While the constantly expanding cast of fodder enemies hit the spot for me, I do want to be honest and say the combat experience from the boss fights often left a little bit to be desired. I think this stops being as much of a thing in the latter portion of the game, but basically every boss from the first half left me feeling a little underwhelmed in terms of gameplay. Now don't get me wrong, the design and appearance of the bosses is incredible. This alligator has a minigun and that cannot be a bad thing, but I found that a lot of the bosses just kind of fell over, even on hard. The bosses were so easy that I essentially never died to any of them at all for any reason. My standard boss experience in this game is just mag dumping into the boss as quickly as possible and melting it super fast while largely ignoring mechanics and that quick decision making and constant movement I found myself enjoying from the fodder enemies I talked about before. Now again, there are some bosses later in the game that buck this trend and definitely gave me the challenge I was looking for, but I think it takes way too long to get there. And on the topic of level design, I think the game has done an incredible job with each and every one of them. The map uses this Cuphead-style overworld to travel between different parts of Mouseburg, which I think is super charming, and all of the different missions have such a healthy level of contrast between each other in terms of theme and vibe. You get to spend time in the slums and sewers of Mouseburg, you get to go to the opera, the swamp, the circus, and plenty of other unique locations. The levels themselves definitely have that whole W aspect to them, but I think that's to be expected not just with boomer shooters, but single-player non-open world games in general. But Mouse PI does a great job of encouraging you to constantly be moving around the map both in and out of combat. Plenty of secrets to discover around every map, lots of spots to jump into weird corners and check out anything that you think might be hidden. I don't have a lot to criticize in the way of level design, except I do want to say that for a game where you play as a detective, I was a little disappointed with how easy nearly all of the secrets in the entire game are. Now, I'm not going to say that I wasn't scratching my head a single time during my entire playthrough, but I can definitely count the amount of times it happened on one hand. The mass majority of secrets in this game are so obvious that I found myself honestly being a little confused on if I had actually found a secret, or if maybe the game had bugged and like the secret was on the other side of the wall and I got close enough to trigger the detection or something like that. And on the opposite end of that, with all the mobility the game gives you, I really felt encouraged to hop up into tight corners, go behind buildings I wasn't supposed to go behind, and otherwise try to escape levels in an attempt to find spots that in the moment registered to me as good spots to hide secrets, and then was usually disappointed to not find one there. Now, I think the developers wanted to make most of their secrets easy to find on purpose so they could have lots of them in every level and reward constant exploration, and I definitely respect that as a decision, but I would be lying if I wasn't often thinking secret spots were just way too obvious for my taste. The next thing I want to talk about is the writing and the dialogue. The writers at Fumi Games really leaned all the way into the goofy style of writing you'd expect from a game like this. Constant jokes about mice and cheese, fourth wall breaks, Leon Kennedy level one-liners, and tons of references to old movies, games, and other media.
I'm not even gonna dignify you with a one-liner.
I'm certain that there are a lot of references in the game that completely went over my head, as I noticed there was sort of a preference to older stuff to kind of match the noir age, but even I could spot a few deep pulls that made me laugh. And not just the breath through the nose laugh, but like a real laugh.
Ticket seller, I'm going on a perilous journey, so I need your strongest tickets. You can't handle my tickets. They're too strong for you.
The humor never really felt cringe in the way that some intending to be funny shooter games these days can feel, and I found myself genuinely hooked on what would happen for basically the entire story. Questioning people's motives, wondering if friends could be trusted, trying to figure out how clues from one case would potentially tie into another, and also appreciating the real-world parallels to some of the themes tackled in the game.
Now, me? I'm a proud Sigma, see?
But I think if I had to give a criticism in the writing department, I would only say that it would have been cool to see a little bit more active detective work from the player, as opposed to from Jack. In this game, you play as a shooter who is also a detective, as opposed to like playing the detective yourself, if that makes sense. There are a few choices throughout the game, but from what I can tell, none of them seem to drastically change the events of the story, and there's never really a point outside of looking for secrets on the map where you're challenged to do anything that resembles detective work. There is still plenty of detective work that happens in the game, but it's Jack doing it, not the player. And this is a really nitpicky criticism from me. I do acknowledge that this is a shooter game, not a crime-solving game. It just has crime-solving themes to it. But I did at least want to mention my thoughts there because I do think it would be really cool if there was more of that in the game. Also, and I think this goes without saying for anyone who has listened to 5 seconds of dialogue from this game, but Troy Baker as Jack Pepper does such a good job.
Some falls don't begin in the sky. They begin in quiet rooms, with friendly voices and fondue bottles.
Perfect take on a serious character in a deeply unserious world, tackling themes that relate to real-life serious issues. All of the side characters do a great job too, and I can tell the casting director really took it seriously.
Thick, rough, like Gorgonzola picante slapped on a mozzarella platter.
The last criticism of the game I want to talk about, and in my opinion probably the most egregious, is the lack of any ability to replay the levels on the same run you've beaten them on, or to even start a New Game Plus run. For a game with so many side quests, secrets, and collectibles around the world to find, I think it is a huge mistake to not give the player any tools to go back and replay a level to find what they've missed, or to even start the game again on the same run. Honestly, I was actually a little shocked during the final moments of the game because of how abruptly it just ended, and it sent me back to the main menu. I thought maybe I'd missed something, or maybe I need to load back in, but no, it was just over. I sincerely hope that a future update addresses this, because this is by far the biggest gripe I have with the game in its current state. Overall, Mouse PI is just an incredible game. An adrenaline-pumping shooter with great writing, incredible art and music, and honestly, it's just fun. The story is fun, the aesthetic is fun, and the gameplay is fun. I don't think the game is perfect, as I've talked about my criticisms here already, but I don't think a single bad thing that I mentioned is anywhere near enough to detract from just how charming and enjoyable of an experience that this game is. You'd definitely be doing yourself a disservice if you missed out on this one, so if you haven't played it yet, I definitely recommend picking it up when you have a chance. But yeah, that's Mouse PI for me. I'm always looking for more games to take a closer look at, so let me know what you'd like to see covered next, and I'll see you in the next one.